Hello, my beautiful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. I had an entirely different video planned out, by the way, which I will hopefully get to some other time, but I tried to battle my muse and I lost. So today, we're going to talk about my favorite character in Lost in Space, the robot. Now, I was born with the ash of Mount St. Helens still dusting the windows of the maternity ward. You might say that falling in love with warrior robots is in my blood. In every incarnation of Lost in Space, my favorite character was the robot. Except maybe when I was tiny enough to have a crush on Will in the first series. Still, it was a hard call. I had no hormones to kick the crush into overdrive, so I might have still been more attached to the robot. Now, the robot in the 2018 version of Lost in Space is a game changer in a very fundamental way. Making him an alien deeply alters the dynamic of the family and the show at large. I went into this in my first review of the Lost in Space series as a whole, but the basics are this. Originally, the robot was of Earth origin, and a robot from your homeworld is an active, one would almost say a living and breathing, representation of everything you left behind. To craft a functional number 2 pencil takes the combined tech and culture of the industrial age. To craft a functional mass-produced robot takes the combined tech and culture of some stage we haven't even achieved yet as a culture. But let's look at the Roomba, and Roomba-like robots as an example. It's no stretch to say that the Roomba can only exist with the current information age we have backing it up. To take a Roomba with you into space and maybe, I don't know, tape a knife on the top, name it Stabby, and start an internet sensation, you need the AI capacity that has been developing since Turing birthed it a lifetime ago in Great Britain, the mechanical production expertise of China, the free markets of the Western world working in concert, and thousands of tiny technological advancements. You need the blood, sweat, and the many, many tears of generations of engineers that came before us. A robot on a spaceship is the very literal living representation of home, of every plate in the cultural armor that protects humanity from the vast unknown, from our sewer systems to our space force. It made perfect sense for the Robinsons to integrate robot into the family in these original series when he was an Earth-based robot. It was without question an asset to their mental and physical survival, a reminder of home and of very practical use. That is what the original robot represented. Changing the robot to an alien robot changes that entirely. He is now a living example of everything that this cultural armor is designed to protect them against. He is not just the other, he is the hostile other. Look, for proper understanding, don't look at this like a modern person on YouTube. Trace any family line you like back a few thousand years. Trace it back to that tribe of 20-odd people living in their own little valley. I guarantee you the word for stranger and the word for enemy are the same. This is mostly due to foreign microfauna being bloody dangerous in the time before sewage systems and modern medicine. However, the pure physical threat of the other tribes posed was a very real thing that every human living is genetically programmed to recognize. Now, the information age has driven this concept of the other very far away. Thus, the show uses an alien robot from another entire galaxy to create this sense of the other. The family is faced with a choice. Do they take the robot into their tribe or not? Remember, to us the answer is obvious. Of course, he's a main character, a sympathetic character. But in the context of the show, saying yes would be an act of superhuman courage. Remember, this is not a fully developed culture with the full armor of its systems behind it. This is a small tribe of people faced with another people proven to be hostile. They are these Robinsons stranded in this 2008 version. They're a Bronze Age civilization at best. Do you remember the story of Troy? There was a big blockbuster recently, so I'll assume you know the basics. But basically there was this massive city that fell to an invasion. But when a city falls to an invasion, it's usually rebuilt by the locals. Why was Troy never rebuilt? Do you know? Well, no one does. But the fact remains that Troy was desolate, dead for thousands of years. No one knew why, other than that just after the records of Troy disappear, every culture in the region collapsed, never to rise again, only to be replaced hundreds of years later. Only Egypt remained, fed by the wealth of the Nile, and Egypt suffered terribly. But from them, from Egypt, we learn what little we know of the situation. The others came. Their Egyptian records, propaganda to be sure, but the only records we have, speak of the sea people, mysterious raiders who landed in ships from unknown lands and wreaked destruction and fire across lands already suffering from famine. These invaders, these sea people, this is what the robot represents. Now, not you, my modern viewer in your civilized city, accepting that interesting exchange student into your exclusive social group. The robot and Scarecrow represent a shipwrecked sea person washed up on the shores of a starving village on the Mediterranean coast hundreds of years before ancient Greece was born. You know that his kind are violent. You watched his kind destroy cities that had existed for centuries. You share no culture. You have no idea if his culture has the same respect for bodily autonomy as yours, more or less. You know that inviting strangers in means that most of the time the weakest and most vulnerable of your loved ones die mysteriously. He might be docile now, but that could, very likely would, change when more of his kind arrive and he has backup. Every likelihood says that inviting him into your village means that someone in your village dies. If he is sickly, it means that your whole village could die, you included. The moment you take him into your house, you are bound by the ancient laws of hospitality to serve and protect him as a friend. Your hands, your weapons will be bound by those laws, but you have no idea at all if he even knows these laws. Generation after generation would pass before civilization rose again to a level where extending hospitality to the true stranger, someone you didn't know at all, would be considered a moral and sensible act. This is the world that the Resolute's explosion throws the survivors into. Their culture might be pulling for them to forgive and forget, but you can bet your bottom dollar that their genes have not forgotten Troy. They have not forgotten the sea people. The reaction of the rest of the colonists isn't bigoted or narrow-minded. It's entirely logical, entirely reasonable, even entirely moral and ethical from the standpoint of both the most primitive tribal mentality and the highest flights of the Enlightenment philosophy, that pure Machiavellian utilitarianism. What, pray tell, would Machiavelli or Nietzsche have to say about the robot? It makes absolutely no logical sense on any level to take the robot into the bosom of the family. Will would be criminally stupid if he asked them to. John and Maureen would be criminally negligent if they let him. And this situation is why I believe the first episode of the series works so well. The tired old trope of the mysterious stranger saving the damsel in distress is ridiculously overused. Be the damsel in question male, female, or utterly alien, seeing it on screen causes most viewers over the age of 18 to roll their eyes at least a little. But here it doesn't just fit, it is necessary. Maureen is a scientist who has been training for colony life. She knows the risks of microfauna. John is a soldier who has faced active combat. He knows the risks of interacting with a warrior from a different culture. For them to accept the robot, they would have to have no in the matter, because all of the data would point to not accepting him. John, it is very deliberate artistic choice by the creators that the family is coiled in a circle around a dying Judy when this choice is made. You see, home is where the heart is. That was their hearth, that was their home. In order to save Judy, they had to risk letting the robot into their hearth. They had no choice. John and Maureen still have their reservations. He still carries the double threat of the unknown in both the biological and the mental sense, but now they owe him. He has proved that he can be a boon to their survival, but most importantly, he has already been accepted into their hearth. Once he was there, the ancient laws of his hospitality, those same Greco-Roman laws that still inform our culture in the information age, those laws dictated that he was now to be treated as one of them. They watch the robot cautiously, of course. Even the innocent and trusting Will is forced to face the true danger that his new friend poses. Will felt what he assumes to be the robot's murderous rampage. More on that later. It terrifies him, and he deals with that terror by trying to make the robot harmless. He thinks that the robot will obey his every order, a mistake, so he orders the robot to never hurt anyone ever. This condition lasts until the robot is faced with the threat and the necessity of violence is made clear. As the Robinson family reintegrates with the community at large, the wider tribe as it were, The natural fear that the other has is entirely unchecked by the bonds that hold him to the Robinsons. Outside of the Robinsons' hearth, he is only the other, the enemy. He isn't the one that saved them. He is the one who murdered their family. The Robinsons defend him by saying that he will not do violence. However, the robot cannot protect Will Robinson while remaining a pacifist. It has to find some way to balance these ideas, this pacifism versus the necessity for violence for protection. He has to balance it in his own processors and in the mind of the tribe. This comes to a head, of course, when the robot defends itself and the family from the vengeful widow, and John is injured in the ensuing confrontation. From the Robinsons' perspective, this is unquestionably a breach of the rules of hospitality, and therefore the robot is cast out from their hearth. Now, the robot does come back. It comes back and proves itself a friend despite the survival-driven actions of the Robinsons. It proves it is so much a friend that it will defend them against others of it. It does this while displaying a level of independence that it simply didn't show earlier in Season 1, and then even more so on into Season 2. The robot makes his own choices. He has changed, and he shows this through his actions. But he is still devoted to this family that has taken them into their hearth. I strongly suspect that this is expanded upon even in his defiance of Will's request, but again, I'll get into that in another video. And come the reunion in Season 2, he is finally accepted back into the hearth far more fully than he was before. This is displayed in the scene on the Resolute. Set at the end of Season 2, it is a near perfect bookend, a reflection of the scene at the beginning of Season 1. In the first scene, the dying Judy is pulled out of the ice and collapses into the arms of her family. She is in the center, the hearth of the family, and they surround her and hold her, searching her face frantically to see if she is well, touching her head, clinging tightly to her. The robot is there, but it's standing to the side, participating, aiding, but apart. At the end of Season 2, it is the robot who has to be pulled out of danger, and it is the robot who collapses into John and Maureen's waiting arms. It is the robot who the family circles round. He is literally in the hearth, the heart of the family. The Robinsons cradle him as tenderly as ever they cradled Judy. He has gone from the other to one of them, and he knows it. When he rises, he does not do it on his own, but asks for John's help, which is freely given and offered with a term of endearment. From this point on, he is treated, like Dawn, as another adult member of the family. They trust him even if they don't fully understand him yet, and they do not understand him. The show makes this very clear, and I will definitely go more into that in a later video. Then they decided to trust him with the lives of their children. He is not just a trusted member of their family, he is a trusted member of their community. He is us and we, no longer the other. But he is still alien. They still do not understand him. I can't wait to see where the show takes these ideas in the next season. So, what do you think? Leave a like to show your support and help out with the algorithm, or a comment to atomize my analysis. Peace out, my wonderful viewers.